How many vendors does it take to meet all your organization's food needs? Just one. EasyCater, the workplace food platform that lets teams order from a huge variety of restaurants, over 100,000 nationwide, all through a single vendor. In addition to all that variety, EasyCater also gives you full visibility of your organization's food spend with invoicing, centralized reporting, and seamless integration with expense management systems, all on one platform. EasyCater, your business tool for food. To learn more, visit easycater.com/podcast.
Every business has an ambition. PayPal Open is the platform designed to help you grow into yours. With business loans so you can expand and access to hundreds of millions of PayPal customers worldwide. And your customers can pay all the ways they want with PayPal, Venmo, Pay Later, and all major cards, so you can focus on scaling up. When it's time to get growing, there's one platform for all business. PayPal Open. Grow today at paypalopen.com. Loans subject to approval in available locations.
Hey, good drivers. Yeah, we're talking to you, the ones who don't speed, the ones who avoid those fender benders, and who always use their turn signal. Congratulations, you're a better driver, and that means you could get better rates with Root Insurance. It's time to stop paying for other people's bad driving habits. You know, like the ones who cut you off just to slam on their brakes. Or the lead foot speeding to work every day. With Root Insurance, you'll get a quote based primarily on your driving. Just download the Root app, drive around like you normally would for a couple of weeks, and boom, you'll get a quote that actually makes sense. It's that easy. Root, because better drivers deserve better rates. Download the Root app today and see how much you could save. That's Root Insurance. Terms and conditions apply. Subject to underwriting review. See root.com for details.
Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is a breaking news update from Bloomberg. Instant reaction and analysis from our 3,000 journalists and analysts around the world.
It looks like it's about 3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1.
3.2. This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital.
You just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no, but it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's not new.
We are, of course, just seeing a live shot and hearing from President Trump and Fed Chair Jay Powell at the construction site at the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. The president making some brief comments about the work and construction that's being done at the Federal Reserve. He's been somewhat critical about the costs and what he sees as cost overruns, and a little bit of a back and forth between the Fed chair and the president when it comes to the cost. The Fed chair is saying specifically that was an inclusion of a third building where work had already been done on. So kind of interesting to see the back and forth. We did also see the president being asked about taking back maybe some of the criticism of Fed Chair Jay Powell. He didn't really want to go into it, but he did also once again say something he has said many times, and that is he would like to see the Fed cut interest rates.
Yeah, specifically, I want to go back to this idea of the different numbers that have been discussed. $3.1 billion is what the president just said is the cost of this construction project. He said this in a Truth Social post, too, just about at about 3:41 Wall Street time earlier. That number coming as a surprise to the chairman of the Federal Reserve, as you just mentioned, Carol. The president took a piece of paper out of his pocket, handed it to the Fed chair, who shook his head repeatedly and said, no, this includes another building. We finished that building 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Some real-time disagreement about the figures that have been discussed here.
Exactly. We should also point out, because trade is certainly front and center here, investors care. President Trump was asked about some trade agreements, and he said that they're doing well with the European Union. And then again, repeated that he wants to see U.S. interest rates come down. They're that as the Fed chair was standing beside him. Let's get to Wendy Benjaminson. I do feel like sometimes there are moments in our history that will stay with us.
That picture, iconic, of the two of them standing there with hard hats on.
Totally. Wendy, of course, senior editor at Bloomberg News. She's out there in our Washington, D.C. bureau. I have to say, Wendy, Tim and I were looking at ourselves, our kind of mouths open. Walk us through what we just saw.
Well, first, just the fact that the president toured a construction site of what is, a fairly routine renovation of a building built in the 1930s. That he would tour it was extraordinary in itself. The fact that he and Powell were standing shoulder to shoulder when clearly they are at odds right now about just about everything that Powell is doing. And then that extraordinary moment you were just talking about where Trump is speaking, the president is speaking and saying what he believed the cost of the renovation to be, or at least what he said the cost of the renovation to be. And Powell just starts shaking his head like crazy, saying, no, that's not right, which is unusual, but he's perfectly within his rights to do that, and pointed out that the extra billion or so that Trump mentioned was for a building that was completed several years ago. And Trump said, well, it's part of the overall project, but it was completed, it was done. I mean, this is the buildings that have irked President Trump and Senator Scott, who was there with them, are I think it's around $2.5 billion.
One person who is set to be there today, the president saying in a post on Truth Social, is Bill Pulte, who is his appointees to the National Capital Planning Commission, but also oversees Fannie and Freddie. I'm just wondering how you view his role in all of this, because he's been so outspoken with his criticism of Fed Chair Jay Powell. And it seems like he's also served as a sort of person who's tried to communicate those frustrations to a wider audience, including lawmakers in Washington, D.C. What is his role here?
Well, you've described it very aptly. His role as one of Trump's team, a lot of these loyal Trump appointees will seize an opportunity to take on the role as sort of the Greek chorus for Trump. He can post on Truth Social and he says things, but then you have this sort of chorus behind him of guys like Bill Pulte or Senator Scott or, whoever else it is at the moment. Sometimes it's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, sometimes it's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And they just sort of step a little bit outside their roles to act simply as an ally of the president and able to take a case on that he wants to take on. This is a little unusual because, as you noted, this Bill Pulte runs Fannie and Freddie, which don't have a direct connection to cost overruns of a renovation of a federal office building. So, it is a unusual role, but it's typical in this administration.
Is it telling? I mean, the body language of Fed Chair Jay Powell, I don't want to get all, psychologist on you, but, it was pretty clear that it was a little uncomfortable and he seemed like he had a stern look on his face. But having said that, Jay Powell has gotten a lot of criticism from President Trump. And I'm just wondering, is it kind of telling in an environment that it's very rare that anyone seems to maybe push back at President Trump to see that actually play out in real time?
Yeah, well, if you think, absolutely. I mean, if you think about them as just like normal people, let's think this is like a normal job. So your boss has been after you and after you and after you for months, telling you you're doing a terrible job. And then the two of you have to go to some public event together and, pretend that you work well together and like each other. And clearly these two don't. And yet Powell had to do the common courtesy of taking the president around the building that he, that he's the chairman of the board of. And so it was already very awkward. And then when Powell started shaking his head and contradicting the president in public, I think we're going to get some Truth Social posts this afternoon.
What do you mean though? Like Truth Social posts in what direction? Like what is the president hoping to accomplish with this? Because it does look like media has been, this is a visit that he gave a heads up on to his followers on social media about this. Media was there. He took questions. Obviously they follow the president wherever he goes, where there is open press. But I mean, this is something he wants the world to see.
Absolutely. And the Fed PR office was also, I think, very smart this morning in offering the media a tour before the tour. So a lot of reporters got to go in there with cameras, with notebooks, with everything to see the renovation. And a lot of media outlets had stories on their sites ahead of the tour saying, here's what it looks like. And so that with the aim that I suppose if Trump were to contradict it and say, it looks terrible, it's going awfully, then, the stories were already out there with the condition of the construction site. I'm no expert on construction. It looked like a construction site to me, but,
Yeah.
But when I'm talking about True Social post later, I'm thinking that Trump was probably, and I have no idea, so let me just say that, but I'm guessing he might be a little annoyed by Powell's behavior, and this will cause him to post on True Social just some extra criticisms of Jerome Powell, who probably figures, one, he can't legally fire him, and two, he already knows he's in the doghouse with Trump, so what has he got to lose, right?
That's a good way to describe it.
And he can't at least legally be fired. So.
Hey, listen, before we go, obviously there was all of that, but he did mention about talking with the Fed chair on a Japan trade deal. We also said that we heard from the president that he's doing well with the EU. Anything else of note from those brief comments from the president that you think our audience should be aware of?
No, you're right. He did mention those. The only other thing I would note is that he once again sort of slapping Powell on the back said, I would like him to lower interest rates. So that was, yet another opportunity for him to remind Powell of what I doubt Powell has forgotten, which is that the president would like interest rates lowered. But the FOMC, the Federal Reserve, is meeting later this month, and they'll decide what to do. And they tend to decide that independently of the president.
That's right.
At least in the last
next Fed
70
decision.
years or so.
Yeah. Next week, right. July 30th. So
that's Wednesday
yes.
that we're going to hear from the Fed chair. And I'm guessing the reporters who are in the room are sharpening their pencils right now, asking questions, getting questions ready about this visit. And I know what
they probably are.
What he's going to say, too, which is he's going to stick to the dual mandate.
Maybe Jay Powell leave that hard hat on just to make sure he's protected. Hey, Wendy, you are amazing. Wendy Benjaminson, she's senior editor at Bloomberg News. She's out there in our Washington, D.C. bureau.
I want to go now to just some updates that we heard from the president. Another redhead crossing the terminal. All these headlines coming together now. The president says firing Jay Powell is unnecessary. The president saying the Fed will do the right thing. The president was asked specifically about other names that he has in mind for the next Fed chair. He says, I have a name in mind, maybe 3 names in mind. He did joke that with Senator Tim Scott that he would be a good pick, but he's not going to leave the Senate. The president said and reiterated there's no pressure for Powell to resign.
All right, let's head back to the nation's capital and to Bloomberg News Federal Reserve reporter Jonelle Marte joining us. Interesting to watch the last hour. The tour between the president and the Fed chair, Jay Powell, obviously some back and forth in terms of the cost of the construction being done at the U.S. Central Bank. Jump in. Tell us what you take away from watching the interaction and some of the commentary that we got from President Trump that followed.
So it appears that the president, he did have an opportunity here to really hammer the Fed, perhaps even more so on what's going on with their renovation. And, he's been very critical of them on social media, as you've noted. And he didn't necessarily do that. He kind of made some comments about how I sort of understand what happened and, these things get more expensive over time. And he did say, I would have done things a little bit differently, offered his input on, maybe he would have avoided some of these costs. But the bottom line seems to be that he did not escalate the confrontation. If anything, it felt like a little bit of a de-escalation here. And it was really another opportunity for him to bring back the message that he has been sending, which is that he wants to see lower interest rates. He would love to see lower interest rates. And, it is a reminder that this is a White House that is trying to exert more influence over these kinds of decisions that are typically viewed as independent central bank decisions.
What do you make of any central bank head or the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve? And I just think about every press conference that we see Jay Powell or any forum that he's in, certainly very careful and thoughtful about what he says, because he knows what he says can certainly impact financial markets. And I'm just curious about the back and forth of the Fed chair, certainly caught off guard, safe to say, right, with that new estimate on the costs, and then kind of correcting the president or saying, well, wait a minute, let me tell you what that's about. It was a little tense. So I don't know, what's the thought in terms of the Fed chair kind of pushing back there?
Yeah, of course, it was a unique image to see them side by side. Usually they're not interacting too much in person, and as we've noted before, it's really uncommon for the president to even go to the Fed, right? Before this, we hadn't seen it since 2006. So definitely a big image to see them together. And I guess not all too surprising to hear Powell push back. I mean, he's very much focused on numbers and the data. And if he hears a number that he's not familiar with, he wanted to see, they handed him the paper and then he clarified, okay, that includes another renovation that's already done, that was done several years earlier. So, I mean, I think that's what we have seen from Powell. He's really likely to say, and his message has been that he's focused on doing his job, focused on the economy. But of course, if he here's a number that doesn't sound right to him, he will speak up.
I can only think about what happens next week. Of course, we've been in this quiet period, so we haven't heard from a lot of Fed officials. Ahead of the meeting that starts on Tuesday, we hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell on Wednesday. That's the 30th. And I'm wondering if you're going to get any answers, or we're going to get any answers in Washington from the Fed Chair, because I know that reporters who cover the Fed are getting their questions ready to ask him about this tour and ask him about the latest criticism.
So next week, for sure, we are anticipating that he will be asked about the tour and the renovations, themselves. What they've gone out of their way to show the press around, to provide more information online about this renovation, because it has become a big line of attack for Republicans that want to maybe push Powell out or put more pressure on the Fed. So it's going to come up next week. We still are largely not expecting for the Fed to lower rates at this meeting, according to what investors are counting on, despite we are seeing at least two Fed governors that were appointed by Trump saying that they would support a rate cut at this meeting. So, it's an interesting time. We could have one or two Fed governors dissenting. But largely speaking, we're probably going to see Fed Chair Powell really kind of keep his options open, maybe more of the same, calling for more economic data before they make a big move on rates.
You cover the Fed. Are you hearing anything about all of this pressure and constant attention on Fed Chair Jay Powell, what it might be doing to him?
I can't speak to exactly what it's doing to him. It is something that people are watching. Is this mounting pressure on the Fed? It's not something that we have seen in recent times. But of course, it's not the first time that we've seen a president come after the Fed like this, or I don't want to say like this, but come after the Fed and try to influence what they do. But clearly, Powell has just kind of held his ground and been a staunch defender of the independence of the Fed.
Would it be bad to say if there's going to be... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so is that it for criticism of Jay Powell? Do you think they kind of got to meet in person and things softened between them in person? Do we see the president lay off him a little bit?
I can't speak for Trump, but I mean, I guess that would be surprising given how much he has said and how critical he has been. I mean, I don't anticipate that this will mean that he's going to stop calling for lower rates.
Yeah,
I just see a meme.
I wouldn't take that bet.
Coming out of this in a big way.
The handing of the papers, just an iconic exchange.
There's going to be something that comes out of this. Janelle, thank you so much. Janelle Marte covers the Fed here for Bloomberg News, joining us from D.C.
For enterprise organizations, managing all your food needs is a tall order. But with EasyCater, you get a single workplace food vendor with the tools and resources to make it easy, giving teams across your organization an easy way to order from a huge variety of restaurants, all on one platform. All while consolidating your corporate food spend so you can control costs, streamline billing and payment, and simplify reporting. EasyCater, your business tool for food. To learn more, visit easycater.com/podcast.
Say you've always wanted to take a spontaneous trip to the Caribbean. Well, here's the thing. If you get smart with your money, you can do things like that. With Empower, you can start making the most out of your money so you can go out and live a little. Isn't that why we work so hard? To have some fun with our money, like treating yourself to something special or spontaneously doing something extra for a loved one. So use Empower and get good at money so you can be a little bad. Join their 19 million customers today at Empower.com. Not an Empower client, paid or sponsored.
Wells Fargo is proud of the important role they play for their customers, their communities, and the U.S. economy, covering more rural markets than many large banks and nearly 30% of branches in low or moderate income census tracts. Also proudly serving more than 10% of small businesses nationwide. Wells Fargo, the bank of doing. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/say-do. Wells Fargo Bank N.A. member FDIC.